For this episode, I would love to welcome Adel Hassen, who is a data scientist with several years of experience developing machine learning solutions. He developed machine learning tools to identify millions in potential education fraud, has reduced payment dispute resolution time from 30 days to hours using AI for information extraction, and has driven $160,000 in revenue by delivering a data product using machine learning to predict drug shortages. It's really incredible. Adel has a Master of Science in Business Analytics and a graduate certificate in Artificial Intelligence from the George Washington University. So I'm really excited to speak with Adel today, not just because of his incredible accomplishments, but also because he's very relatable as someone who's more on the introverted side. So welcome to the stage, Adel. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Seth, for the amazing introduction. And I'm truly honored to be on the podcast. My name is Adel Hassen. I am a data scientist. Right now, I'm at Dataiku, and that's an AI platform. I've worked a couple other jobs before that, and really excited to be here. And that last part, yeah, I am introverted. So I think I do fit into the Quietly Ambitious Analyst podcast.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. And you've had a ton of experience in data science. But before we get into that, I want to
Hmm.
ask you a quick warm up question. So, what
Yeah,
is something that's been bringing you joy lately, either inside or outside of data?
yeah, I like it. Start me off easy. Yeah, let's start with data. Obviously, I love data science. So being able to work in data every day is amazing. And I'm actually not too new anymore, but relatively new. I've only been at Dataiku for about 6 months, and I've been learning a whole lot there. And it's a brand new platform. And just being amongst, a lot of smart people, and then also just watching the field, just massive changes with agents and just generative AI as a whole, and being a part of a company that's, trying to be at the forefront. So that's been exciting, a whole lot of learning there. But then outside of data, data is not my entire life. When I do clock out, this time of year, it's currently October, September, October time. It's great weather. Based in Rockford, Maryland, so not too far from Washington D.C. So enjoying the outdoor weather, and then been playing a bit more basketball too. So yeah, that's what's bringing me joy recently.
I love that you mentioned that you've been in this new role and you've been learning a ton on the job. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people that I meet in this industry are pretty obsessed with learning. Would you say the same about yourself? Because that's the vibe I get from you.
Yeah, 100%. I guess I do love learning. Whether it's short form content that could be LinkedIn or YouTube or longer form courses. Trying to get back more into the books as well. Like the textbooks, it's just a textbook is hard to consume. But yeah, I'm a lifelong learner for sure, and it is something. It's an attribute that you have to be in data science because things change so rapidly. And yeah, that passion plus that desire to constantly learn is going to do you a whole lot of good in data.
I think that anybody who gets into the field, it's not for the faint of heart
Mhm.
because there's so many things you need to learn and the industry's always changing. So I love that you mentioned that as one of your joys because that's been mine as well. So I want to get into your journey a little bit because you have a ton of experience in the field. So how did you first discover data science and what drew you to it?
Yeah, how did I first discover data science? I guess I could talk a little bit about my time in university. So I started as a math major. I didn't know what data science was going into undergrad. I think this was about 2016. The term became popular maybe a few years before that. But I went in as a math major just because I liked numbers, I enjoyed statistics and whatnot, and math just made sense to me. So after that, long story short, I didn't want to do math anymore. I just didn't see the practicality behind it for me. So I found business analytics and I transferred over from my sophomore year in business analytics. That's kind of where I was exposed to data science concepts and then the idea of a data scientist job, just because, they talk about what do you want to do after graduation, and this title data scientist kept coming up, and I was like, interesting, what is this? It sounds really cool. Looking more into it, it kind of paired together a lot of things that I enjoyed, that included statistics, that included tying things back to impact. Like I don't want to just work in vain and do nothing. I don't want to
Right.
do experiments all day. Want to contribute to something that affects people or affects a company and business analytics, data science. That seemed like it. And yeah, that's kind of how I got exposed. We also had like organizations like the GW Data Club that, helped me learn a little bit more about the field. Yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. If not, I probably would have been a consultant because I was in the business school and that's what everyone else does. But I get I got lucky. Now I'm in data science.
I was just thinking how lucky that is to have realized in your sophomore year that you wanted to transition out of math into data analytics. That feels so lucky just because I think for a lot of people, you pursue this whole degree and many years out in the field and then you
Mhm.
realize so many years later, but it just seems like that it kind of clicked for you in the program.
But yeah, 100%. You have to credit, professors and then just people around me who, told me to explore, told me to speak to people. Again, that's not something I always did. Just, you see someone, you might be kind of interested in what they're doing, go talk to them. They might be a senior or a junior. People are willing to help. So just kind of getting out of my shell a little bit, being an introvert. I like to be, self-sufficient. If I can find something online to help myself out, why do I have to talk to someone? But, people have experiences that you can't find online and, those experiences and just advice from professors and then combine that with what I see online help me get to business analytics, maybe a little bit earlier than I would have on my own.
Right. That is such a good point. The fact that we need connection with other people in order to discover new things, to have new realizations. The internet can only get us so far. And as someone who's introverted, it's hard to take that leap and start those conversations. But it sounds like once you did, it really paid off. And speaking of being introverted, I would love to hear more about the moment that made you realize that you could actually thrive in this data science field without having to be the loudest person in the room. Because I know there's a ton of stigma out there that you have to be incredibly loud and boisterous and voice your opinions, get everyone to hear your ideas. So, what has that looked like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because, people always tell you you have to speak up in meetings. It's not just enough to do your job and all that sounds really difficult to me. I'm like, man, I would prefer to just be on mute for the entire duration of the meeting. Why can't I just do my work in the background? But what I realized was, my work itself had a lot of value. People are always asking for visuals, for reports, for numbers. So there's value to it. All I had to do is take that value and then just bridge that gap. So add a story on top of it or help people come to decisions. And that means I don't have to be the loudest voice. I can let my work speak for itself. And then, that last 20%, that's where I come off mute and kind of help paint the story or help make a decision or help guide strategy. And yeah, I don't have to be the loudest person in the room. It's just making sure that I bridge the gap.
That is such a unique way to think about it. The fact that 80% of the work could be your analysis, but the 20% is where you really take it across the finish line through your story, your conversations with people, building trust with stakeholders. That sounds really powerful. So I know that data science can feel really technical, but it is also incredibly human, as we've been talking about. So, how do you stay connected to the why behind the data?
I think you have to tie it back to what data science is. It's really just helping people. People come with problems, and you have a unique skill set. You know how to work with, these different tools, whether it be a Python or Excel or Tableau. You have strong mathematical foundations, and then you can tie that all together to help solve problems. So you go and ask the right questions, you find the right people. You really, you have to be you have to have empathy and understand what their problem is, feel that problem, and then say, "Hey, I have my skills and I can go help you with that." So I always try to tie it back to, what is the person feeling and how can I help them feel better about it? How do they want to feel? And use the skills that I have to help them feel better. It's
That's such a great way of explaining it. I think of my stakeholders as my clients sometimes.
really,
Like how can I make them happy? How can I alleviate their pain? And at the end of the day, I would say numbers are just an extension of human behavior. We live in a world with customers and we want to improve the customer experience for them. It's all about how can we help solve problems for other humans.
That's really the job because the numbers themselves don't mean anything. The models don't really mean anything on their own. It's, the human perspective that determines whether or not something is valuable or something provides impact. So always tie it back to the people.
So, as you're
Mhm.
working with stakeholders, I'm sure you've come across moments when they're non technical, they don't understand the model that you've created, they're not very familiar with the deep learning involved. So, when that happens, how do you build trust with those stakeholders and how do you ensure that they're not fatigued by this
Mhm.
situation?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems because every organization claims to be data driven. Everyone wants to have data backed decisions. But, when it comes to the meeting, sometimes people, they just don't want to, they're sick of the data team. They don't want to hear anything because, people don't like it when you're just throwing a whole lot of jargon at them. They don't understand. They don't feel comfortable anymore. They're just like, what are these people saying? So I try to just don't talk too much about the methodology per se. That's not really what people are interested in. Another good thing is to make sure you're speaking their language. Everybody in the organization has certain KPIs or certain metrics that they're focused on. Try to always tie it back to that. If you're talking to finance folks or a CFO, for example, try to tie your, you know, talk about cash flow. If you're talking to CIO or CTO, talk about, system availability, things like that. Talk in their language and, don't get caught in the details. I know, people are proud of their work. I get proud of my work if I do something cool, but no one really cares like what model you used or what amazing features you designed per se. Like that's not really what they want to look into. So yeah, that's those are two big things. And then I'd say try to put the power in their hands. And that's done by giving them good options to choose from. You can do all the work to come up with those options, place them in front of the stakeholder, provide the trade-offs for each option, and then let them make that decision because oftentimes it's fear and ego that get in the way of people not wanting to use data. But you know if you give them the final choice, they're going to feel more comfortable and they're going to feel a bit more in control, and that can kind of help build that trust and get rid of that fatigue.
Fear is so real. I have seen it so many times. And I have also seen what you said about companies wanting to be data driven and still feeling so afraid to make
Yeah.
change. And when we're talking about communication and empathy, is there a specific time that you can recall where that has actually mattered more than the model that you've used or the metric?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. At my first job out of school at the US Pharmacopoeia, part of my job was predicting drug shortages. Obviously, it's pretty high stakes. And, a big thing for us was focusing on specific model metrics. And yeah, that's great. Like we understand like the better we do, you know, we're helping people. But, we work with other organizations and from time to time they would come in and we would hear stories of people, who had to go through so many hoops, try their best to get life saving medicine for their kids. And that just puts things in perspective. You're like, man, like, you know, yes, my job is to optimize for a metric, but it's kind of providing that story behind the metric. And like, once you understand, like, hey, recall isn't just a number that I'm trying to push up, it's the better the recall is, that means if we're predicting drug shortages in the future, we're better at doing that. And that means, less occurrences of us missing a potential future drug shortage. And that's the worst case scenario because if we don't have enough of a drug, then, that could be someone's life. So putting that in perspective is just like, hey, like I really understand like what I'm doing on the job. And it's more than the numbers and more than the model.
That sounds so powerful because at that point, it extends beyond just pull these numbers. How can we increase or decrease XYZ? It then becomes how can we impact communities? How can we
Exactly.
support people? And I think that a lot of people who get into this field, they're passionate. They want to make an impact. And that's a big driver for why to even become a data analyst or a data scientist. So
Mhm.
I think your example just perfectly illustrates why the numbers go beyond. I'd love to hear more about any common mistakes that you tend to see either new analysts or new data scientists make, because I know there's a ton of different traps that people can fall into. Maybe
Yeah.
you've experienced them yourself, but what can people kind of avoid doing if they're starting out in the field?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. There's so many. I've made so many different mistakes. Let's see. I think a big one is to just focus on what's in it for your stakeholder or for your end user or for the customer more so than focusing on yourself. Simple language changes in like the words you use can make a big difference. I feel like growing up and just like in our society, we tend to be pretty individualistic, which can be good in certain scenarios, but in the scenario where you're trying to help someone out, doesn't really work too well. So, for example, you might tell someone, "Hey, I built a model that does X, Y, and Z." That might not resonate as much as, you know, now we can do X, Y, and Z because that's what your model is intended to do. So things like that, like small changes in your vocabulary can resonate more with people. Another big thing, we already talked about it, but make sure you speak the language of the stakeholder. One other thing you can do is um, the takeaway of whatever, if you're building a model, a report, whatever it is, the takeaway has to be clear and obvious. Like it's not the consumer or the end user's job to figure out what they have to do with your work. Like that's your job as a data analyst or the data scientist.
That is absolute gold because I think a lot of analysts don't think about what the recommendation is, how to carry things forward. And if you can take it all the way through and close the loop,
Hmm.
then you're going to see more impact in your role. These have been really great examples, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience on the communication side of things, especially since that's something that I'm very passionate about in this field.
Hmm.
I would love to switch gears a little bit and talk about your mindset and your growth because you've had so many incredible experiences as a data scientist. So, how do you define success for yourself? And has that changed over time?
Yeah, I feel like getting into the field, my definition of just success and like what I want to be was just I need to know Python like the back of my hand. I don't need to be knows, what is it, Stack Overflow, nowadays ChatGPT. Like I don't need to do that. And then just know every single machine learning algorithm, be able to implement it, know when to use it. That's what I thought success in this field was. But, I quickly realized one, there's more to the field. It's not just technical, there's the human side of things. And then, I kind of reframe what success is. So now I consider success just doing what I tell myself I would do. And that kind of helps me build my internal confidence, helps build belief in myself, just creates a virtuous cycle where, you know, there's that positive reinforcement as long as I do what I tell myself to do. And the other thing is just making sure I focus on what I can control. So that concept of input versus output goals, I can control how much time I put into something, but I can't really control whether or not, let's say a LinkedIn post does amazing. Like I can't really control that, but I can control my effort and how much I put into it. So yeah, I can't obsess over things that I'm not controlling. So that's kind of how I've changed a little bit over the last 5 years or so.
That sounds like a really healthy mindset to have for people starting out. There's this overwhelming feeling that you need to know it all.
Mm.
And when you just start comparing yourself and you're at step one and you're looking at someone else's step 10 and they know all of these different tools and methodologies and approaches, it can feel like it's going to just take you forever to get there.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm still like that today. LinkedIn, you scroll LinkedIn and you see so many amazing things. And I'm just like, wow, I can't even think of doing that. Or that imposter syndrome starts to kick in. But I mean, I try to realize that, we're all on our own timeline. I don't have to know everything ever. And it's just as long as I kind of define my path and what I want to do, stick to it. Like, there's no problem if I'm going faster or slower than someone else.
Accountability, just self accountability,
Mm.
also sounds really powerful. I know we talk about confidence and breaking into the field, leveling up in your space. And The common idea is that confidence will come to you. You will feel motivated one day. You will feel
Mm.
inspired. And that's when you'll pick up learning these tools or working on different projects or making an impact. And with what you shared, it's just really powerful to realize that confidence actually comes from doing. The act of meeting your deadlines and following through with what you said you're going to do, that alone will increase your confidence. So I love that you shared that.
Yeah, that's what it's about. And I try to tell myself nowadays the three pillars or whatever, three steps: direction, action, and consistency. Because one, you have to take action, but you don't want to just take blind action. So that's why I have direction. And that doesn't mean, taking forever, just getting stuck in the preparation mode. It's just how can I quickly figure out what I need to do? Once you figure out, have an idea of it, then you take action. And then you just have to be consistent on your actions. And then hopefully you get to where you wanna go. And if you don't, it's fine. You tried your best. Yeah, I try to tell myself, it's really not that deep at the end of the day because, I can try to have these input goals instead of output goals, but I'm still human. I definitely wanna hit my output goals as well. So it's all a balance.
Direction, action, and consistency. I hope you are going to trademark that.
I should, but that's too much work.
It sounds like a great framework. I love it.
Thank you.
It's great. So I would love to hear more about how, like, when you feel the most in flow as a data scientist. When are the times throughout your day at work and you're just feeling in the moment? You're just diving into your work and you feel energized and fulfilled. What does that look like for you? When does that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say usually in the mornings, it's probably a good idea to turn on do not disturb, no Slack messages, no Gmail. And doing it in the morning is a good time for that. Narrowing it down to one specific task because, I can easily get scattered, 10 tabs open, questions pops into my head, go down a rabbit hole. So I can get lost. So I try to narrow it down to one specific task. It's probably going to take me, 15 to 30 minutes to really focus my attention and start getting into that flow because, context switching and whatnot. And then after that, I just enjoy solving problems. I try to frame it as me versus the problem. Just like, okay, what am I going to do to win today? Because I'm not going to lose to this bug or I'm going to figure this out. And then it turns into, it can be fun and it can be rewarding once you figure out the bug and you win for the day. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. Try to do it in the morning, try to, avoid distractions and then frame it almost in a gamified way.
That is such a great example. I have not heard that before. You versus the problem. That
Yeah.
sounds like the perfect mental scenario to set up.
Yeah. Do you have like a specific thing you do to get in the flow?
I really like to start broad and then just let myself slowly get more detailed with the work. So if
Mhm.
I have a particular problem that I'm trying to solve, I'll start off just sitting on that problem, thinking about it. There's a lot of kind of mental work involved
Yeah.
if I'm taking breaks, even if I'm not working and it's after hours, I'm just sitting with it. And a lot of times that alone has helped me to get better at actually working through the problem when it comes time to sit down and do it.
Yeah, I really like that. I try to do that sometimes as well, where even if I'm not going to work on it, I'm like, let me just inject it into my head. Let me go read it real quick, or let me go read the code or whatever deck, just so it's in the back of my head and like it can start working in the background. And, those shower thoughts might come up and I'm like, wow, I figured it out. So yeah, I like to do that too. But yeah, I like that, how you get into the flow.
I was reading about that the other night, and I can't remember how they described it, if it was called like reflexive procrastination.
Mm.
And people think that they're procrastinating, that they're being lazy when they're taking time to step back. But
Mhm.
it's actually doing you a service because your mind needs to process and you're rewinding your mind with all the different conversations you've had. So yeah, it can be helpful to step back, especially when you've been staring at a computer screen for, many
Yeah,
hours on end. I would love to wrap up this episode by hearing more of what advice you would give to people who want to grow in the space without losing themselves throughout the process.
that's a great question. And I definitely have a lot to say around that because really passionate about the field and I'd love to see other people break into the field. I'd say one big thing is just going into it, just giving yourself grace because one, it's a challenging field, obviously. Like it's technical field. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of different concepts and topics. But you have to have that belief that you can do it. And then also just set realistic expectations. You're not just gonna become a data scientist in 2 weeks because you took a course that told you you would become a data scientist in 2 weeks. That's not how it works. But focus on your foundations, understand how to work with data, even more so than the tools themselves, just knowing when you get some raw data, what you do with it, how you inspect it, what steps you take to clean it, how you communicate your changes over time, how you present that data to a non-technical stakeholder, things like that. So working through that data lifecycle. Another big thing is data science, data analytics. It's vast. Try to pick an avenue early. Again, going back to that direction, action consistency, like that provides you with direction. Because imagine preparing for data scientist interviews. There's like 15 different interview rounds. Like you could have a machine learning system design round, you can have a SQL round, you can have a case study. Obviously, you have your behavioral. If you don't want to prep for 10 to 15 different types of interview rounds, pick a specific flavor of data science. Do you want to be in product data science? Do you want to be a machine learning engineer? Do you want to be a data analyst? And that just breaks down, how much you have to study. So that's another suggestion. And then make sure you get hands on. And don't just copy a tutorial. Tutorial projects are a great way to start. But then think about interests that you have, and then build a project around that because you are naturally going to have if you have a problem in that interest, you're going to put in more effort and you're going to build a better story around it. Just because, for example, I'm interested in sports, I keep up with it daily. When I work on my project, I'm going to understand for if I'm building a machine learning project, what kind of features might be beneficial. When I go to report this project, I'm going to build a better storyline just because I understand the intricacies of sport and like how, sports fans want to hear about a model in sports. So yeah, there's a lot of things I could do. And then try to talk to people, The more you talk to people, the more you realize that, everyone's path is not straightforward. Everyone's still trying to figure it out. Everyone's learning something new every day. And we're kind of in it together, trying to help each other out, make it in this, exciting, but it's a taxing field. You really have to like what you're doing.
Those are all incredible suggestions as you're trying to figure out your path, making sure that you're doing what you're passionate about. Adel, you've shared so many incredible insights. I think people are really going to enjoy listening to this. Where can people connect with you or follow your work?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I hope people can benefit from this because that's the purpose of it, right? We're just trying to help other people out, trying to tell people what we wish we knew 5 years ago. But yeah, yeah, you guys can find me online for sure. I am on LinkedIn primarily, and it's just my first and last name, Adel Hassen. And you can also find me on Substack now because I started writing on Substack. And I think it's like adu.hessen.substack.com. But yeah, that's really where I'm at for the most part. LinkedIn more so, but more to come on Substack.
Perfect. Well, I will be sure to include those links in the podcast description so that anybody who's listening can follow along. Again, thank you so much, Adel, for attending today. It's been a pleasure having you on this podcast, and I am so thankful to have the opportunity to get to know you more.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Truly honored to be on a podcast like this. And yeah, I hope we can benefit a whole lot of people. And I'm looking forward to see what you do with this podcast.